Look, I'm one of a handful of people that don't take corporate PAC money. I don't understand my Democratic.
What about AIPAC money? You take AIPAC money, don't you?
A minuscule percentage of my resources come from.
I read it's like 800,000.
Yeah, but that's a lifetime number of raising tens of millions of dollars. Let me give you the right stat. The majority of my money comes from small dollar contributions. My last report, I think 76% of it came from people that gave $25 or less.
Now, we may have just caught Senator Cory Booker in a lie, and we'll explain how shortly. But that answer right there, Cenk, I want to get your initial thoughts. What do you make of Cory Booker's attempt to spin away his donations?
Yeah, I love it, man. I love all these guys getting caught. Every single one's reaction is AIPAC. What's AIPAC? I never AIPAC? What is it? Tupac? I never heard of it. Oh, that was minuscule. It's 871,000. But wait till you hear the real facts, which Jordan's about to bring you about what he's gotten this year. Then I'm going to layer on top of that the secret way that they give them so much more money, including what Rabbi Shmuley of all people told me about how much the pro-Israeli lobby has given to Cory Booker over his lifetime. And that number is gigantic. So we'll get to that.
Now, that clip of Booker was from an interview with Jennifer Welch and Angie Pumps Sullivan of the I've Had It podcast. It was released on Thursday of this week, which Welch appears to be referencing the following graphic from AIPAC Tracker. Cory Booker has received $871,563 from the pro-Israel lobby, a minuscule amount as you heard him describe it. But despite its name, AIPAC Tracker reports on contributions from all pro-Israel groups. The graphic notes that Booker has received almost $900,000 in donations from 4 different groups, as well as individuals associated with those groups. Now that data was sourced from Open Secrets. AIPAC was not listed on that graphic, but according to Sludge, Senator Cory Booker has received donations from the AIPAC Political Action Committee for the first time in his career. Federal Election Commission filings show Booker received $481,175 from AIPAC's PAC during the first and second quarters of 2025 combined, followed by an additional $226,628 in the third quarter, which was disclosed just yesterday. As of AIPAC PAC's most recent FEC filing, Booker's campaign was the top congressional recipient of its contributions this year. So when you add the AIPAC money on top of the total previously reported by Track AIPAC, you get, whoa, $1.5 million, Cenk. A minuscule amount of money. What do you make of this?
Okay, guys. So there's so many more layers to this, and we're going to ask you to call his office in a second because it's a great campaign that some progressives are doing. But first of all, that's even just a small part of the answer here. So the other day we covered a story for you guys where we showed you how much Larry Ellison had given to different people, but first he would interview them and make sure that they were pro-Israel. Then he would report back to the Israeli ambassador. This is according to leaked emails from Larry Ellison, the guy who owns Oracle and now owns half of American media, buying TikTok, CBS, Paramount, etc. And so if you look at the AIPAC tracker, Marco Rubio is only taking $1 million, but that's the stuff that we all know and is public. Then there's the stuff that goes to the super PACs, and that's where Larry Ellison alone, just one guy who's pro-Israel, gave $5 million to that super PAC to support Marco Rubio's campaign in 2016. So that's just for one campaign from one guy, and that's 5 times what the official number is. So then all of that doesn't even include the dark money. So they're funneling millions and millions and millions of dollars to these politicians. Why do you think they're all act like dogs of Israel? Like you're like, hey, we're in the middle of a genocide. All good Americans, Muslim, Christian, Jew, atheist, doesn't matter. We're all horrified by it, right? What are you doing? Stop giving them money. What are you rewarding them for a genocide? We've given them $21 billion in the middle of a genocide. But when you see the actual money going to these politicians, you begin to go, oh, I see. And by the way, that's if you're a good boy, you're gonna get an enormous amount of legalized bribery from people who are pro-Israel inside this country. But on top of that, if you defy Israel in any way, you're gonna get an enormous amount of money spent against you. So $4 million against Nina Turner, Marie Newman, Andy Levin. By the way, you've got black, white, Jewish, Christian, you got every group covered. They attack every kind of American that doesn't back Israel. But they started out with just spending $4 million a race. By the time they got to Jamal Bowman, I believe they spent $19 million against him. Now they've spent $35 million against Mamdani, and luckily that one's not working. But there is an enormous amount of pro-Israel money. Does that affect our politicians? Of course it affects our politicians. You'd have to be blind, deaf, and dumb not to see that it affects our politicians. You would have to be a recently escaped mental patient not to see $35 million affecting politicians. That's why last night you saw Andrew Cuomo's debate. All he was talking about was Israel. He barely ever even talked about New York. It was all Israel. He's not bowing down to Israel. Why? Because there's $35 million behind that. So that's how politics works in America. Now there's wonderful people in America fighting back. So one of them is Robert Greenwald. So if you ever watch the Young Turks, you know I love that brother. He runs Brave New Films, and they're constantly doing amazing work. This one, they had this ad ready that they're releasing today before Cory Booker even went on that podcast. Why? Because they know the history of Cory Booker. So here's an ad they're gonna run in not just New Jersey, his home state, but across the country about Cory Booker. Watch.
Over 25 hours on the Senate floor, Cory Booker never once mentioned the tens of thousands killed in Gaza or the billions in US dollars fueling Israel's war machine.
When the rights of some are violated, they are a threat to the rights of all of us.
The US has provided over $20 billion in weapons for Israel's war in Gaza.
Are we going to defend democracy or behave like the authoritarians that we should be against?
Booker's taken nearly $900,000 from pro-Israel donors. Call Senator Booker and tell him to vote yes to block the sale of US arms to Israel.
Yeah, so look, first of all, do that. Here, let me give you the number. And this is Brave New Films putting this out. Go, and you don't have to be angry about it, guys. Just super easy. There's all of his numbers, especially the Washington, D.C. number. That's 202-224-3224, 202-224-3224. Just be polite. Just say, hey, listen, we want you to serve New Jersey. That's not too big an ask, right? Why are you taking so much money from Israel? Okay, but you know what? Forget the money you took from Israel. I don't care what money you took from Israel, okay? But I need you to stop sending money to any country that's in the middle of a genocide. That's not a high ask. That's a very low bar for an ask. That's a bare minimum of ask. I don't care if it's Cambodia, Israel, Turkey, any country that's doing a genocide. Don't send them $20 billion. Look, Brave New Films is amazing. They also did Journalists Under Gaza, Journalists Under Fire. Go to bravenewfilms.org and check that out because they showed all the over 200 journalists killed by Israel in the war. There's Holocaust survivors in that movie. If you could just stomach that 41-minute movie and still support Israel's actions in Gaza, I say, okay, well, I mean, I think you've lost your humanity, but wow, I guess you mean it, right? But it's impossible to sit through that movie. It's a short movie, but it's impossible to sit through it and not have your heart broken by what Israel's doing in Gaza. And there's, like I said, there's Holocaust survivors going, no, don't, what are you doing, right? So there's such wonderful Americans here fighting back to try to help the Palestinians and also preserve our sovereignty. So look, I think the Cory Bookers of the world are living in the past. And so I promise you this, so I'll tell you this, and then we'll catch up to the future, which is, so I debated Rabbi Shmuley Boteach at Oxford Union. I debated him a couple of different times, God help me, and also God help him. So anyways, afterwards, he told me something strange. Now look, take it with a massive grain of salt, not the most reliable source. But he told me that the pro-Israel lobby had given Cory Booker $26 million back when Obama was in office. And that when Cory Booker backed Obama on signing the peace deal to get uranium out of Iran so they would not be able to have nukes, it was a great deal, Cory Booker signed on to it. Rabbi Shmuley said they cut off Cory Booker from then on and didn't give it to him for a long, long time. Now, obviously they're back to giving to him. Now, again, I don't know if Rabbi Shmuley is telling the truth, but that is an amazing thing to say. And if that scale is correct, then the pro-Israel groups have been giving And really, let's be honest, purchasing our politicians. And they're not the only ones. Big Pharma does it, the defense contractors do it, oil companies do it, but they're all purchasing our politicians. I love that Brave New Films is fighting back. All of you can fight back. And they have a 90-second version of that as well. So yeah, it's time for these representatives to actually represent us and not corporations or foreign governments.
Well, I wouldn't take that guy's word verbatim. Looking through his financial records, nothing seems to indicate that. If there was a sum of that much, it would be outside of election contributions and would implicate something I think much more serious, which I don't, as the criticisms of Cory Booker on this, I think are justified. I don't think that we think he's taking money on the side. But when there's two things. This idea that he doesn't take corporate PAC money is a recent pivot trying to save face in a new political climate where it's more popular to do that. You're seeing a lot of people who have in the past, and we'll get into more, now abandon it. But this idea that, oh, he's dismissing all the old money. Oh, that's lifetime. Let's look at what it means for Cory Booker to be a lifetime recipient of pro-Israel money. From his first election into the Senate, he was taking pro-Israel PAC money. And his voting record over the years supporting anti-BDS legislation, which has then over time led to punishment, crackdowns on pro-Palestinian speech. That is how those laws take effect. Censorship. That's what Cory Booker supports. And even to this day, even recently, he was in a photograph, although he tried to hide in the back of the crowd, with Netanyahu, and he has been nearly silent on this issue. He can't find the words for a guy who can filibuster for hours and hours on end for a fundraising attempt, who can make big, grandiose statements in Senate hearings, suddenly just can't find the words on something that is crystal clear to the rest of us. And this is somebody who for years has talked about the legacy of South Africa's apartheid. Cory Booker is not stupid. He knows what's happening in Gaza. He knows what's happening in the West Bank. He knows what's happening to Palestinians. He's deliberately ignoring it because he has taken money from pro-Israel PACs his entire political career.
Yeah, so last things here. Guys, let me double down on what Jordan's saying. So first of all, Rabbi Shmuley didn't say they gave him the money directly. He said campaign contributions. But even more importantly, it was Rabbi Shmuley. So you don't necessarily believe it at all. I'm just relaying to you what he said to me. I didn't believe him either. But whatever it is, seems like it was a big number. But even if you don't believe any of that, right? And even if you get into his past, you don't get into the super PACs, you don't get into the dark money, we already know at least at $1.5 million. I mean, that's a bare minimum. And then mainstream media in America will say, oh no, $1.5 million would never affect our politicians because they're so holy. They're nearly saints. That's why that kind of money would normally affect anyone, but it doesn't affect them because they're, I guess, morally superior to us, right? No, of course it affects them, of course. And you can see it with your own eyes. And so, no, look, mainstream media is gaslighting you in mass to cover up the giant corruption. They never talk about the money in politics when money in politics drives 99% of what happens. Finally, look, speaking of morally uprighteous or not, if you're taking millions of dollars to support a genocide, that's morally depraved. Sorry, I know we're supposed to be civil to one another, but is it civil to send $21 billion to murder 20,000 Palestinian children? To drop bombs on their heads and have their heads explode? Is that civil? Oh, I know, but you got paid. No, I'm sorry, but that's morally depraved. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets its wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.